I'd say I'm a pretty big Professor Layton fan. So when I first got my DS, it was one of the 3 games, I believe I had 3 games that I got with it. The other 2 being Brain Training, and Pokemon Diamond. Now, at the time, Pokemon Diamond was my go-to. I was a big Pokemon fan, so that was the only game I really wanted to play. And I'd heard of Professor Layton, seen the adverts obviously, didn't really think much of it. It's just puzzles. Who cares? Then I played it, and I started playing it, and I kept playing it, and the puzzles were fun, but it wasn't the puzzles that kept me going. It was the story. And I think that most people can probably relate to this. I enjoy the puzzles, I wouldn't play Professor Layton without it, but at the end of the day, you play Professor Layton because you're invested in the characters and the story that's being told. And I was invested, and I stayed invested, all through Curious Village, and then Pandora's Box, and then The Lost Future. And I played all 3 games, and I fell in love. Professor Layton and The Lost Future is absolutely one of my favourite games of all time, like top 10 favourite game. I'm not too proud to admit that when I played that game, I cried at the end. I was about 12 years old, 13 years old, and I cried like a baby. I am not ashamed to admit that. It's the only video game that's ever made me cry. I don't cry at media as a general rule. Marley and Me and Professor Layton and The Lost Future, those are the 2 things, you know? So, at that point you might expect that I am a big Professor Layton fan, but it goes a bit deeper because when I was about 16, I became obsessed with top hats because of Professor Layton, and I got obsessed with the idea of being a gentleman. You know, being someone who helps people, who always puts other people's needs ahead of his own. And I aspired to that because I thought that was the way that you should live life, you know? So I got obsessed with top hats, and at a certain point my mum got me a top hat for Christmas. Or it might have been a birthday, I think it was Christmas. But either way, I got this top hat, and I tell you, I wore it everywhere. I'm serious. Like, shopping, I would wear the top hat. Going to see family, I would wear the top hat. At school, I couldn't wear the top hat, but when we had non-school uniform days, I would wear the top hat. And then when I went to university, I had a different top hat at that point because the first one was a bit beaten up and battered. But I still wore the top hat. At university, I was known as the top hat guy, which was actually quite funny because I wasn't the only guy that wore a top hat everywhere. So I was one of 2 top hat guys. Professor Layton has informed a lot of who I am, both in how I like to present myself to the world, and also in the traits that I consider important and at the cause of my being. So I am incredibly excited that we're getting a new Professor Layton game. Frankly, in the last Nintendo Direct, it was the most exciting announcement for me. And frankly, you know, the fact that I'm not super into games like Pikmin and stuff like that definitely helps. But even then, you know, everyone knows how big I am into Mario Kart. And the announcement of Birdo and Yoshi's Island and, you know, all of that stuff, that was exciting to me. And then, obviously, there was also Tears of the Kingdom. But no, Professor Layton, that was what was exciting to me. And I still haven't actually completed the Azran Legacy. I've completed the other 2 prequels. Frankly, the prequels I was never as into. And I'm going to have to finish Azran Legacy before, you know, the new game comes out. But I am still really excited to see what this brings. Because if it is anything like those first 3 games, and especially Lost Future, it will be a special time for me. It will be very special for me. I do have my reservations, just because of the fact that I know that those prequels I wasn't as into, but I am still cautiously optimistic, I would say. Now, the trailer looks good from what we've seen. I would say, I mean, the fact that Luke just kind of comes in, what is it, a mech? the robot legs thing. That's pretty cool. It kind of... This seems like it's going to be an interesting setting with the kind of, I guess, steampunky kind of vibe. It's looking quite interesting. I will say that setting it in America, I'm not necessarily against, but I I mean, as a Brit, I do like the Britishness of the Professor Layton games, and especially just, hearing the British accents, and that's going to be de-emphasised now. I mean, obviously, Layton and Luke are both going to have British accents, but it's going to be a bit weird adjusting to the idea that everyone's going to be American now. Or most people, I guess. But so far, the setting and the overall mystery is really intriguing to me. I mean, there was that bit at the end with, what was it, a gun? Which was weird. And also, actually, that one line that Luke said about, "We can't stay here." I'm wondering what that could mean, because I've been turning it around in my head, and, uh, like, this is all about a technologically developed society, and I feel like there must be something that would happen if they stayed out in the open for too long. Maybe robots or something? AI? Is this a thing about AI? I don't know. We can't really tell what the story's going to be about at this point, but overall, that's, I mean, kind of what you want, isn't it? It's Professor Layton is about mysteries, and the fact that they're able to keep that mystery and they're not revealing too much is good, I'd say. Um, I think one of the other reservations I have is about the actual visual style, the 3D. It does look good, of course. However, I do hope that the 2D cutscenes still come back. I think it was always a treat whenever you got to one of those cutscenes. The 3D looked fine. The 3D, you could have, you know, the characters talking with their voices and stuff like that sometimes. But it was never quite the same as the 2D cutscenes. They were special, and they were always really cool. I mean, that the sword fight between Professor Layton and Anton is absolutely awesome. I absolutely love that cutscene. That, and also Clive's machine stomping all over London, are probably two of my highlights in terms of cutscenes for those games. They were always so cool. And I hope that they kind of bring those back. As much as the 3D style will probably work, I feel like it would lose something if it didn't have those in there. But overall, that's a small thing. I'm also quite interested in what they said about the city developing as you solve puzzles. Because, I mean, there's so many different things that could mean. For the plot as well, because, I mean, why would that be the case? Maybe we're fighting against some evil that kind of recedes as we complete more puzzles, or something like that. There's so many different things that could mean for the plot, but in terms of actual gameplay, what does that mean? I don't know why, but I'm getting an idea that this is not going to be like a point-and-click adventure like the previous games have been. And that maybe it's going to be more exploration, 3D exploration based. Which I'm not against, actually, at all. I think that could actually be an interesting medium to take it in, even though I do actually really like point-and-click adventures. But I think it could be interesting to actually have it, have Professor Layton in a 3D world, a 3D environment. I think that could be really interesting. So if that's the case, then that could really be quite a big shift for the franchise, and it would be welcome, I'd say. Yeah, overall, I love Professor Layton, and I can't wait to get stuck into another Professor Layton game. And I just hope it doesn't disappoint me, because that would be awful if that happened. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of make a quick little video about that because Layton is something that is very close to my heart, and the Professor Layton cut trailer comes out, and you know I'm gonna be on it. So yeah, that was that.